Welcome to the Free Cities podcast. My name is Timothy Allen, and this is the official podcast of the Free Cities Foundation. Hello and welcome to this episode number 69 of the Free Cities podcast. Well, today, once again, my bags are packed in advance of our trip to the UAE, where we'll be starting to film Zones of Progress, which is our short documentary about the history of special economic zones and the future of cities. I'm very much looking forward to that, especially because I'll also be recording some new episodes of this podcast while I'm in Dubai. More of that to come over the next few weeks, of course. Back to today's show, and we're delving into one of what I would call my least visited sections of the Free City spectrum. I'm talking with two members of Regen Tribe, which is a startup involved in the Regenerative Neighbourhoods ecosystem. Now, if you don't know what that is, well, stay tuned for your 101 introduction. Oscar Correa is the founder and CEO of Regen Tribe, and Nicole Reese, the Director of Operations. Our conversation takes us on a journey through many topics such as eco-village design, futurism, pioneer communities, as well as self-sovereignty, self-sufficiency, and, of course, the broader topic of the regenerative movement in general. If you're new to the Free Cities podcast, we have a Telegram channel that's very active. Look in the show notes for a link to that, especially if you're looking to connect with other folk innovating across the Free Cities movement. Diversity of thought is definitely our strength, as you will no doubt discover. Come and see what people are building throughout the world. Come and investigate what I would call certainly the sharp end of the wedge. Anyway, if sharp wedges aren't your thing, well, you're here, and you could always just sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Nicole Reese and Oscar Correa. Tell you what would be really useful is if you both introduced yourselves. And Nicole, how about you go first? Just who are you? What's your who are you?
Right. I studied as a cultural anthropologist, studying the history of humans. It deeply fascinates me to know where we came from, to be able to not replicate history and all of its fallacies. Our interests are in, as futurists, how do we consciously design a future that is friendly to all humans and non-humans and the ecosystems in which we live?
So, and what would you say is your... I'm trying to put you in a box here, obviously, right? So forgive me, but what do you do on a day-to-day basis? What's your kind of... How do you fit, for example, how do you fit into the Free Cities world? There's a way to come at it.
Right. Well, it's hard to do that without introducing, my work with a Regen Tribe, but I'll start kind of how I got on this journey of, okay, how do we redesign society? And it really came across in discovering what is known as an eco-village, people exiting society to build their own bubbles where they grow their own food and are self-sufficient and have also learned how to consciously design human relationships. Many of the most successful of these projects refer to themselves as research centers for peace. Because they're exploring alternative governance systems, more socially inclusive circles and ways of relating to each other that, I think provide a really hopeful solution to the chaos that we see at the macro level of society. And so I got really excited discovering that thousands of these projects exist around the world, and that I could learn about them and study them, and that also there's a specific part of this being what I see as a local scale solution to the macro problem. I don't think that we can solve the problems in society if we try to attack. Like, it's like eating an elephant. You can't eat it all in one bite. So I got really excited about eco-villages, and that was kind of my introduction into this world of people who were providing alternative solutions to society. And then I've been studying them for 5 years. I got certified as an eco-village designer, and I've been researching and been on this journey, and I became aware of the regenerative movement, which is an entire wave of people that's kind of like the second wave of tech-powered solutions to these village-scale projects. And along the way, I met Oscar as well, who had founded a Regen Tribe, and I had a separate project, Serenity, which was based on providing educational and matchmaking solutions for people building and eco-villages or seeking them. And now we're on this new wave of like, wow, we really see all of the possibilities of like infusing Web3 and tech with these different village projects. So to more directly answer your question about what I do on a daily basis.
No, well, that's great. And you introduced Oscar quite well there. So let's segue into Oscar. How do you fit into this? And then we'll discuss what it is you're both involved in right now.
Jack of all trades journey for me. Studied engineering. I was in the military. Had an event marketing business in Miami. Stepped into a Web3 blockchain startup in London, and was grateful to take a sabbatical after that. And the Bitcoin popped to 20,000 in 2008, more or less. I decided my journey was environmentalism and giving back to this planet that gives us everything. To shape this, it started with solving a problem first, which was plastic. And this, through a 2-year journey, brought me to Mexico, where the topic of regenerative neighborhoods, sustainable, intentional community land developments was introduced to me. And I realized this was the solution, not fixing a problem, but actually creating the solution of providing the infrastructure needed to live in alignment with nature, which is one of the big topics we're all facing today, and providing the intentional, lively programming that people need to align with themselves, align with each other, and make the decisions for the planet that will give us longevity as a species. This interesting confluence of spaces I worked in and thrived in as an entrepreneur, right? Serial entrepreneur. Never pretty much had a 9-to-5 office job besides that startup in London. And that was really a bunch of friends building tech things. All merged to decide, wow, this product of a regenerative neighborhood is the saving solution for all the important things in the world. Shelter, water, food, energy, human experience. All the things that humans need to thrive and the planet needs to thrive. How do we do this at scale? How do we create this haven for humans and planet so that it's accessible and available to everyone, every single human being on this planet? And this was the birth of the Regen Tribe mission. Something so much bigger than myself or a group of talented entrepreneurs that I am grateful to be around every day. It's a global thing, right? It's a movement that we're building. The regenerative neighborhood movement is how we've coined it. Because it requires all of us, all of our skills, all of our magics, hyper-inclusiveness, traditional forms that were created of governance, of decision-making, of creation that came from a history of scarcity, lack of education, lack of resources, fear. We're in a new place now in the world where, sure, that still exists, and a bigger percentage of humanity, number-wise, is living in abundance with access to infinite information, connections around the world. So to design from this place of abundance is New Earth, is the direction that we need to go in. So connecting the social aspect, the technology aspects, the business aspects and merging them to create this product and bring it to the world at scale, decentralized, exponentially, is essentially the mission statement of Regen Tribe.
Wow. Okay. So my pickup from that is regenerative neighbourhoods. Let's talk about that. I like the idea of this. My first question is, so in the model of regenerative neighbourhoods, are we talking about a diversity of governance models as well? A diversity of, I don't know, design ideas? Is it literally just a decentralized network with the let's say the ethos behind it all, regeneration? Is that, am I onto the right thing?
Definitely.
Right. Okay. So, and are you working on one in particular in Mexico? Is that, am I getting that right as well? Is there an actual physical version of this thing that you are working on right now?
There are actually like 16 different projects that we've contacted in Mexico, and about 4 that are partner projects that we've been working on.
Wow. Tell me about one of them then, or one of them in particular, or a few of them. Describe, what is this place? Like, what's a real life regenerative neighborhood look like in Mexico, and where is it as well?
Wow. So one of our flagship projects, Kuyabeh, is a nearly 400 hectare project that was started by a traditional developer who realized who had a pretty life-threatening accident, and after that he realized, like, wow, I have to contribute to the world. I have to do something incredible, amazing, and give back. And so he designed this completely biophilic infrastructure on this land, selling lots to people. Can
I just butt in?
Yeah, of course.
Biophilic? What does that mean?
Yeah, so biophilia is just like mimicking aesthetic designs in nature.
Okay,
yes.
In architecture or in planting as well? Or no?
In the field of any design,
right.
Yes.
Okay,
in all the ways, biophilic, a love for nature and designing to mirror, right? Model success, be success is one of the Tony Robbins inspiration quotes that follows with nature as that muse.
Do you know what? I'm going to come back to what you're saying. It just reminded me of something, biophilic, because I never heard that word before. But years ago, I worked on a documentary about living bridges in Meghalaya in northeast India. Have you ever heard of these?
I've seen them where they like bend the trees the trees end up wrapping with each other to create.
That's biophilic, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They're incredible. I mean, that was the most astonishing thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And there were stones impregnated into the roots and stuff, hundreds of years old. Anyway, okay, right. I know what biophilic is. Sorry, carry on.
Oh, of course.
This project.
So it's a massive project that has eco-construction methods and has basically designed for people to live a really intentional, sustainable life. There's just a massive amount of opportunity to live there.
And it's 400 acres. And what kind of buildings are there?
400 hectares.
Sorry,
400
which is about
hectares.
750 acres.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so the vision holder of the project has gone, let's call it, totally off grid with the project. Has, with his leverage in land development, him and his family that have been in Mexico doing this for a long time with great success and lots of projects, have petitioned and moved government to designate his area, which is by size already its own micro city within Mexico, within the Yucatan Peninsula, have also moved to create it in, let's say, validated eco-village bio development, which means there will be no concrete pavement. There will be no poles in the ground or, let's say, designated city things. They will have their own team that will be doing validation for water systems, waste management systems, to give this place an authentic, not just neutral footprint, but a carbon positive and net positive footprint in the space.
And how many dwellings are there?
There's 500 lots.
But okay, right. So it's the business model is sell them off people?
Yes.
And do you have planning restrictions and things like that, apart from, no poles or whatever?
The internal team will be monitoring the materials that are used, the eco-design of the spaces, and the square footage or square meters that is allowed to be developed on, which is 10% or less.
And how many are already built?
There's 8 homes that have been built. 2 are residents who are starting to enter and live on the weekends and begin their journey in the space.
Okay, right. So here's my first thought about these kind of places, because I've kind of drifted in and out of places like this my whole life.
Right.
Is how do you keep people there?
Right.
How do you stop places like this becoming either weekend places or holiday homes, or eventually what often happens is they become investment properties.
Right.
And then you have these soulless places,
And this is the challenge that he is facing at the moment, right? The project has been live for 8 years. And in these 8 years, only 2 are kind of going on the weekends. And this is where we come in. The answer is to make it a destination place where when you arrive, you enter this bubble of both social appreciation, social love, social acceptance, and you find the amenities designed that would mirror a proper modern city design. I grew up in Miami, and there was an area there called Wynwood, where was kind of a not really developed part of town around train tracks. And what they did first is they put artists to put beautiful murals everywhere, right? So now it's aesthetic at the very least. Then they put a co-work space, a coffee shop, and an art studio in this area. And before you knew it, people were coming, the hipsters entered, right? The social, let's say, validation of the trendy ones coming in, enjoying the space. Before you knew it, skyscrapers came up, and now it is the hottest part of the city. So with this style of social development, right? Humans follow humans. We're pack creatures. So to bring this ideology of social drive, social draw to a space is one of the first pieces for people to have the amenities that they desire in a cityscape, albeit 25 minutes from the main part of the city, creates a destination bubble where once you enter, you're probably not going to want to leave. When you can get farm-to-table food at the restaurant.
Well, I just wanted to point out that this is precisely why they're a partner project, because everything that we do is around community design and culture design and experience design. And so, we have this opportunity there to develop a pioneer community on this land, which allows kind of the early adopters to come that hold a torch and stay there and are community operators. And that's one way. You need to be kind of selective about the people that you invite to be there that are excited to hold the torch and excited to live there long term, because then that sets the stage and the mindset for, this is a place where you want to live because everything is provided for you, like Oscar was mentioning, farm to table experiences, and this sense of like all of your needs are provided for.
It's funny because this is a conversation I have a lot on this podcast about when you're starting something new like this, how do you keep people there? And the two big issues I find is, number one, your pioneer people are often digital nomads. They're the people that actually have the mobility to be able to move somewhere, sit down, but they're also, by their nature, not the kind of people that are going to stay for a long time, which is a real issue. Do you think there's anything in that at all? Are you digital nomads yourselves?
We are, yes. We nomad to different communities to study their inner workings and understand them. And what you said is spot on. Even I know someone who bought into Praxis, and he's clearly stated he has no intention of living there. He just wanted this kind of special feeling of having access and being a member. He really has been flat out about it. He's like, I'm not going to live there though. So to be mindful of that when you're starting a project like this. And that can be solved by also, so in projects like these, if you're just building like the special economic zone where it's industry focused and you want to innovate in certain fields of tech or medicine, that's great. But if you aren't building a place that is actually desirable to live and fresh with culture, then you're really just building like a dead zone.
This is the other thing. See, speaking to digital nomads that know that world, they're the ones that would say, yeah, it's hard to get a digital nomad to stay in one place.
Right.
On the other end of the scale, I talk to like proper old school city planners, right? Mm-hmm. And they say that it's not human nature to live in one place, even if it's 400 hectares.
Right.
And you'll think, this is close, this is close. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a version of, the kind of 15-minute city thing, which everyone seems to hate. Mm-hmm. Everyone. I don't know who likes that idea. But, and certainly myself, I woke up in Wales last night, and now I'm sitting here with you in Prague, and I feel great. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. I don't live in a city. I'm happy to be here. I'm looking around. It feels amazing. Mm-hmm. So how do you deal with that side?
And so this draw is a piece of the hyper vision that we've incorporated into our organization, our collective, and the way that we're creating this as a network of regenerative neighborhoods around the world. The key being to create a social, let's call it, filter process, right? And it's not exclusive in any way. Just to enter the bubble, you need to have certain education and trainings of conscious communicating, peaceful conflict resolution, things like this, that when you enter, you meet a certain kind of person. At this community in Mexico, or at the one in Portugal that we're involved with, or the one in Berlin that we were just at over the summer. So you get these digital nomads and give them the ability to move, while also, society takes everybody, like we said at the beginning. The digital nomads are one of the slices of the pie, right? There's also the families that are homesteaders, that are looking for places that give them the place to place their anchor. And this is the value of this movement that we are growing. Very much how this Free Cities Foundation is growing a movement of people looking for these kinds of spaces to position and place projects in front of. We're doing a very similar thing. It's really beautiful. The mirrors there. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea is that you would have a network of places and be able to jump between them. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what happens when the world gets locked down? How does that work? Right.
Which we've seen.
Definitely.
We've actually seen this. It's astonishing to watch it play out. But it's one of the flies in the ointment, I find, to a lot of these ideas.
Right. Well, when things get locked down and you don't have the ability to move, the idea is that where you happen to be at that moment is designed in a way that gives you the amenities of being in whatever city is your favorite. And more so, the biggest, let's say, gap or thing that people missed during the lockdowns was human connection, right? The ability to be around your people, your tribe, right? Again, this organization's name was started during COVID. And because of these natural filters that we are putting into the social design of these places, the people where you happen to be locked down at one of these Regen Tribe validated communities will be, by design and by education and curation, your people, whether you are just meeting them or you've known them for weeks or months or years that you've been at this space, because we are all on the same plane of communication standards, of governance standards, of essentially intention, right? It's the biggest alignment. So when that does happen, you'll have, not your neighbor that you kind of know but don't really know and really don't even talk to. You'll have a group of humans around you that are curated for this kind of livelihood, and you'll have the amenities, right? An art studio, a makerspace, a farm, all the beautiful things that you probably wouldn't even have in a city. But because we're designing with this lens, we can create micro cities with all of these beautiful amenities. A trendy coffee shop to do work and meet people, and a quiet coffee shop to go and just be in your own space and have a latte or whatever it is. almond milk latte.
I can actually speak to this because I was both living in a community during lockdown and I was in touch with people in different communities during lockdown. And these were some of the happiest places because they were insulated. They didn't have to quarantine from each other. They had all their needs provided for. They were socially experiencing deeper levels of bonding. And because the people that were normally coming through just to stay as guests in short term were also now there. And so it was actually a really wonderful time. Some of the one project that we work with, another one in Mexico, was communicating, that time was actually the best for us because we had people just focus inward on the community and the community experienced a lot more consistency.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because I traveled. I did a lot of long-term traveling in the 80s and 90s, right? Mm-hmm. And I've been back a few times. I've dipped back my feet back into that world, and it's a very different world now. What it strikes me is that this idea is an extension of the digital nomad idea, which sprung up sort of in the late 90s, early 2000s. And now it's well, let's solidify this a little bit and turn it into a network of places, real places. Okay, so here's my...
well, I would argue that it started sooner. I would argue that it sort of started in like the 60s when people really started to lean into anti-government rhetoric and understanding, wow, like the systems that we exist in don't provide us what we want. And they're also like the civilians experience a kind of disillusionment in that sense. And that's when they went off and started being like, you know what, we could probably do it better if we did this for ourselves.
Yeah, okay.
And this was the eco-village movement, which we are now, since we're observing this, the eco-village 1.0 model, we call it. The people who left the matrix, let's call it, and created their little bubble and built a fire for themselves. And this evolution that we're on now with connectivity and radical inclusion and scale is Eco-Village 2.0, let's call it, where now it's let's build a fire and let's get a round of people coming through regularly so they can go back to their places and build their own fires and design their micro-societies that are aligned with nature, themselves, and each other.
Okay. My observation when I traveled and when I do travel was that one of the risks of things like this is you create a community of expats, basically. And it's very unusual to see people, really local people, included into these things. Because, to be honest, I don't know whether this is true, but they probably don't do yoga, for example. They probably don't eat bioorganic food or whatever. They're just local Venezuelans or Mexicans or whatever like that. And I'm not judging it as right or wrong. I'm just saying that is a very common experience of mine. To be somewhere and look at that thing, that's a bunch of Westerners just setting up a community, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But is that true? Is that real?
So this falls into our observation of the Eco-Village 1.0 model, right? A lack of consciousness and design for radical inclusivity, right? Just like the correction of racial profiling or gender profiling, where you kind of want to bring it to the other side a little more to balance the things out. We are on this agenda to integrate these indigenous and traditional wisdoms into the creation of these places with direct programming and invitation that not just opens the door, but lays a red carpet out and guides these local magicians that know the place and know the magic of a place to bring it and integrate it into these expat, usually funded and operated spaces to better integrate.
So I was actually going to speak to that. I think, like you said, it actually is wrong, and it's something to be mindful of. It's a common pitfall that I think free cities and regenerative neighborhoods and anyone pretty much going out and trying to build something different should be mindful of. It's something that many people fall prey to because we have our own biases and we have our own, ethnocentric approaches, and we don't realize that in a sense, like building a free city in Honduras could be considered neocolonialism. But that's what we're working to avoid, and there are ways to do that. So the kind of eco-gentrification that could happen can be avoided with like radical inclusion and making things available in the language, having local allies that you're actually working with, making, you know, it economically accessible, but also culturally accessible to these people who want to participate, and understanding. So for example, if you are designing a free city or a regenerative neighborhood, I see them as actually very, very, very similar. You want to approach by building local alliances and also understanding the need. Like if you're going to build a place that isn't culturally appropriate, you might want to re-examine your strategy and make it more accessible. And so this is something to be mindful for everyone. But as it stands, for me, someone being a conscious land steward and potentially teaching local neighbors about how to farm regeneratively or how to use technology to have a more regenerative lifestyle, like that for me is exponentially more impactful than whether or not they can participate in programming of the community itself, as long as there's like a contribution of like a local impact that can be measured positively. Like that's the goal.
I suppose one of the tough barriers to entry would be the money, because if you're selling plots for dwellings, right. I'm almost certain in Mexico they're going to be pretty cheap as far as we're concerned, but for your average Mexican, probably out of his or her price range.
Agreed.
Maybe. I don't know. How do you deal with that? How do you?
And so modeling the concept of model success, be success in nature, right? There's a circular loop where one thing has abundance, another thing has the complementing piece, right? We started this conversation with how do you find the ones that set the flag in the ground? And the solution is a lot of locals. These are the people that's home for them and potentially would never travel out of their home for financial means or for just lack of that ability offered to them. So there is a magic in where they have something in abundance, which is the time and the anchoring to a physical location. When designed correctly to fill the gaps of each other, this local group really complements and supplements the people living, holding the space, holding the magic of a physical location. So that's one of the easy solutions, right? Where this man has lots, hundreds of lots, literally has sold 150, still has 350 lots available for his project. And some of the locals actually aren't so interested in being in the space. There are, however, many locals that would love to be a part of a project like that, and because they're not in their financial means, a lot of these distributed ownership models that we are very, very passionate about and sharing with land projects like this, where you create a time bank style system, where after a certain amount of contribution to a project, it's rewarded with stewardship and ownership of your space to be one of these flag holders, pilot community members.
It's funny because I'm still, the jury for me is very much out on whether a community where everyone is included even works. And I tell you why, because I used to live in London years ago, and I moved to a very, what you would call diverse neighbourhood. But when you looked under the surface of that neighbourhood, they were a bunch of communities all living alongside each other. There was the Turkish community, there was the, blah, 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 whatever. It wasn't actually this melting pot of people. Right. What you noticed was, though, that the social strata were integrated. So you'd mix with the Turkish guy next door if he worked in a similar field as you. Right. Or the guy down the road, like if you earned roughly the same money, you were in the same social circles, then you mixed. But actually, along the kind of other, in the other direction, nobody really mixed. Right. So, I mean, is it something even to aim for or not? I don't know. Like, I'm still working it out.
So you can say that let's say, national bubbles were converging around the financial spectrum, right? So two different nationalities that maybe traditionally wouldn't merge because they lived in their own areas, because they made the same amount of money, for example, and went to the same watering holes, ended up merging, right? So there are, by design, ways that you can create these melting pot scenarios. It comes through activations. And this is the piece of unintentional community that is key, right? The social design around it. Right? As humans, we're pack animals. And finding our common denominators of music we like, art we enjoy, activities we like doing, sports we like playing, presenting and actively curating these kinds of scenarios where people from different cultures, genders, races, socioeconomic backgrounds have the opportunity to find their common denominators is the way that you merge these bubbles. And with proper design and programming, this is the piece of the social variable, right? Building a place is ones and zeros on a spreadsheet and throwing money on a table and getting infrastructure up. The actual variable that makes these places, makes them or breaks them, is the social construct. The design of the activations and the programming to merge these bubbles. And you saw it happen with the financial thing, which is the oldest paradigm in the human journey, money, right? To break through that and introduce different spaces where these people can mix and combine is key for the design of these places.
It's the intentional part of the sustainable intentional community land project, which is also what I see, for example, free cities are trying to do. They're trying to bring together people with similar ideologies around freedom and sovereignty. And these are like motivating and inspirational North Stars for these people. And that's something that's unifying, I think, beyond social strata. And also like the intentionality of the connectedness you have to humans, I think supersedes background and culture, especially if you're redesigning it in a society that is strategized to accommodate for that. And also, like, I'm super fascinated to point out how the regenerative movement really runs parallel to the Free Cities movement. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the difference of like sovereignty and self-sufficiency and how they complement each other. Because sovereignty, right, is the legal ability to say, I am my own entity and I don't have to answer to you. I can write my own laws and govern myself. And self-sufficiency, which I think is prioritized a little bit more by regenerative neighborhoods, is the ability to not be economically dependent and thus vulnerable to the whims of an outside system, which I think we can all agree is really fragile. So when we talk about building these new havens, whether they're, they have to be like beacons for society, and that they have to integrate both sovereignty and self-sufficiency if they want what I see as full autonomy. Because what I understand from the libertarian movement is that you're attempting to exit from different systems that are not functional, are actually quite dysfunctional, and build something new, because you're like, you know what, I can do it better. I can.
I mean, libertarians really at their core are just trying to live by a non-aggression principle. I mean, really, there's a lot of quirks to being a libertarian. I wouldn't even necessarily class myself as a libertarian, but I certainly believe in the non-aggression policy. I think that's perfect.
Definitely.
If I have to aggress to get you to do something, then it's probably not the right thing.
Right.
Go on then. What are the motivating intentions then behind Regen? Can you sum them up? 5 top things that you're the kind of, I don't know. Don't have to be 5.
Hit it, Oscar.
Our principles, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Those are the principles that we've laid
verticals,
out.
yeah.
Right?
Why don't you go through those?
Would say, the reason I ask is you were saying, like a lot of free city projects are based around ideals, or ideology is a strong word, but ideals, let's say. So what are the Regen ideals? And how?
A lot of these principles that we're seeing, like, that are very trendy, that go in the direction of this unity mindset, right? Radical inclusion, radical self-expression, be yourself, things that create safety for the individual to express themselves, to address the traumas, right, that a lot of us have just by nature, to be able to step into our best selves internally, and allows us to connect externally with others as well in the most effective way to create things, to create businesses on site, right? Co-creation is one of the principles, right? We host the spaces for radical collaboration over competition, one of them. Biophilia and biomimicry, right? Modeling nature. Model success, be success. It's one of the big ones for us, right? Nature, the best startup, the oldest startup that exists, with or without humans as consumers, actually would thrive in either way. So another one of our principles, technology, integrating the tools that we have come up with as humans, not to, like some apps, waste your time and keep you locked in, but to improve our time so we can actually do what we're here to do, which is live a happy life, connect with other humans, and create beautiful things for this world. What are some of the other principles, some of the other main ones?
Yeah,
we have a beautiful graphic about it.
Yeah, so our 6 main principles are regeneration, collaboration, and co-creation, kind of like what Oscar touched on, biomimicry, which is a deeper form of biophilia in that it mimics the designs, the functional design of nature, not just the aesthetic design of nature. What we call the meta-nature verse. So integrating technology with nature and building technology after nature, and also leveraging the technology that exists in nature. And then these principles of understanding the machine, which is nodding towards the systems that are in place, and then tending the garden accordingly is the 7th principle, where having knowledge of the systems that we come from and the deeply inlaid structures that we're trying to redefine, how can we strategically reinvent those?
Do you have people actually talking with governments about getting independence for these kind of places, or is that a long way down the line?
So it's interesting, different projects are doing it in different ways, right? And different countries make it much easier or a bit more difficult, right? In Mexico, for example, which is why we've really grounded in Mexico and launched in Mexico and we're inspired by there, a lot of the land there is ejido land, which by definition is not in the governmental context, right? Ejido land is essentially indigenous land. These lands are actually sovereign lands for Mexican government. You don't need building permits to build on this stuff, which is a double-edged sword. Some people are taking advantage of this for profit and, again, capitalistic gains, which is a shame. And you see it a lot in places. People that are coming into this with a regenerative mindset, right? Embodying all of these principles that we just shared of improving, making a positive impact, leaving things better than we found it, are using these spaces in this exact free cities mindset of sovereignty from the man, you can call it, right? Within these bubbles of indigenous and private land in a way. So this is one of the ways that we realize is the free cities movement before we were even introduced to this organization and this foundation. We've met a few people on our journey. For example, the founder of a DAO that is promoting vitality and regenerative medicines and organizations. They're actually looking right now to buy land that is free from government, right, scrutiny, so that they can test a lot of these vitality products and medicines that they're looking for. So we're starting to encounter, as we are going more public with what we're doing and what we're bringing to the world, right? The goal is to help people create successful regenerative neighborhoods, both through infrastructure and the intentional piece. More and more people that are finding us and saying, okay, we have this idea, but we don't even know how to start to create society. And it's not easy, right? We're actually very, very excited to be in the room with the free cities community that they're growing, to see what direction they're going in, how they're doing it. It seems to be that every vision holder we meet so far is unique, is doing it for some reason or another. Some because they just want clean water and fresh food to eat. Others because they're looking for sovereignty from the government that is oppressive and doing things in self-interest, right? And others that just want to live around people that feel like family to them. So it's exciting how it's happening and happening in different shades. In Mexico, definitely, because of this indigenous land that is shared, right? To enter this community, you need to prove to these indigenous owners what value you're going to bring to them. Sadly, some of them are happy just to take some money. And it opens the door for people that do it, again, to kind of extract with this capitalist mindset. Others really protect their land, right? They're there holding the ground of their space because it's their land. And to enter these spaces, you have to bring value to the community. You need to enter the community to create your community. And that is really, really beautiful as we're seeing it.
So several projects have pursued different amendments and special, basically commissions of their legal status and how they need to report to local authorities. There are precedents for communities that have been able to change laws and get special distinctions that allow them to do what they want on their land. I don't think that legal autonomy is as much on the forefront, but this is actually what I see as a really exciting piece and overlap for how like the Free Cities movement could collaborate with the Regenerative Neighborhood movement. And that many of these land projects already exist. People are innovating in like Web3 and tokenizing land projects and running themselves through decentralized autonomous organizations, which is blockchain-based governance. And so there are already so many exciting and investment-worthy projects that could use that missing piece of legal autonomy that would actually be really welcoming to investment and collaboration with different people who are looking for these to create these special zones and are interested in like an ROI that comes from a sustainable community land development.
I noticed, Oscar, in what you were saying, you mentioned capitalism a couple of times in a not so good light. Right. I'm interested to know what your views on capitalism are as it stands. Right. I mean, obviously, how do you feel about this system?
So I'm an entrepreneur. I admire the free market. I admire what the supply and demand curve can do and understanding that machine. I honor it very much, right? It dictates a lot of the way that I operate and design businesses. At the same time, the word capitalism prioritizes, and the metric of success is zeros in a bank account. And that's not okay, right? The metrics that we need to be defining things by today, with the urgency that's happening around the planet, is environment and humans. Capitalism, again, creates the metric of success. So when you decide, do we push people into suffering so we can make an extra $1 million? I'm not okay with that. Do we make $500,000 and allow everyone else to live their best life? That's a decision I can stand behind. And I'm happy to take that $500,000 and live my best life with it, while also providing for people that deserve it and need it. Not just people, but also environment, right? We're in a world today that, again, based on that metric of success, those people are doing their best and deciding their best. And they're just stuck in that construct of money being number one. And they don't care that people survive or suffer. And they don't care that nature survives or suffers. And that is the biggest mistake that humans are making at the moment.
Do you have a word for that?
Extractivism?
No, I mean, what would your version of capitalism be that works? How do you incorporate human experience in capitalism? Because arguably, I don't know, if you like free markets, you would say that the free market will show you what the result should be.
Right.
I mean, I think it's just broadening the definition of a stakeholder. Like when you see that you have to answer to different stakeholders and in investors, you also have to understand that nature is a stakeholder and the broader society is a stakeholder. And so just if you widen that lens and there are different regulations around that, I think it creates a much more friendly economic system.
That's obviously in you're going to come up against the free marketeers then. The regulation and free markets.
Well, again, the free market's beautiful. Just changing the metrics by which the free market is dictated, right? The free market shouldn't only be dictated by zeros in a bank account. It should be dictated by the well-being of the nature that you're around. It should be dictated by the humans that are part of the organization that you're building. If your factory sits on a river, the river should be one of the stakeholders of your factory. So if you're making $100 million a year, a percentage of that should go to monitoring this river and honoring it. And if you're dumping sewage into it, fixing that by any means necessary, even if your $100 million mark drops down to 80 million or whatever it is.
Yeah, obviously, I don't know. There's a bit. I can see a bit of an inconsistency in that, in as much as I agree, the humanity of a situation is very important, which is why I kind of like the idea of a free market, because that is 8 billion humans deciding what should be happening, and everyone's decision is correct, even if it's polluting a river. Even if one guy wants to pollute a river and 1,000 don't. The free market still should show you that polluting a river would be wrong.
Right. So we're kind of on this stream because the capitalist, let's say, right? And I don't bundle capitalism as people with businesses doing things. I just am referring to the topic that money is the only metric that matters. That's what I mean by, right? Capitalist. Capital is the decision. We need to shift to more humanist, more environmentalist decisions. I see what you're saying with that. And the free market is skewed in that way because there's so much history and power and rules written for that system because it has so much time that it's been in the forefront of decision making. Just again, like we had to transition away from racial inequalities and how we're transitioning away from gender inequalities, right? Let's say the meter has been to the side of capitalism for such a long time that to transition out of capitalism and get back to a more balanced center, we need to start shifting a little more to the other side. Same as it happens with racial topics, right? Like, what was it? I'm forgetting right now. Not Black Lives Matter, but like hiring, and you need a certain number of like diversity quotas, right? Kind of like shifting a little bit to one direction. Same with gender things like that, that really require putting more effort to bring the scales back to the center, just because it's been like this for so long. And it just so happens that out of 100 products, 99 of them don't take the environment into account because they focus on capitalist decisions where money is the only metric of success. If there were more options, the one option that is good is not so affordable because there is not much of a market for it. And this just happens because of the delay. And this is why this free market is skewed to that side. It just happens to be what's in our face and pumped through our systems. Because those are the guys making the decisions and with an abundance of resources that they've been stockpiling since X amount of time.
I think one of the pitfalls, though, is take the environment. You want to save the environment. You can either legislate to save the environment, which is basically forcing someone to do something. Right. Or the non-aggressive principled policy would be to convince them or incentivize them to preserve. Because let's face it, most people don't preserve the environment because it's not even on their minds. They're just trying to put food on the table. Who cares? It's a luxury belief, I think, saving the environment. I really do think that's true because I know if I look at my friends, there are people that care about the environment. There are people that are not so don't care so much. It's almost certainly to do with how much it's on their mind because how much free time they've got, how much money they've got to even deal with those kind of things. Do they want to buy, a Tesla? No, it's 60 grand to buy a Tesla. They're buying a $3,000 car, or whatever. It's like, and it might be polluting. I don't know.
But well, I wholeheartedly agree that on an individual level, a sustainability lifestyle might be considered unaffordable, but on a planetary level, it is absolutely something that it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. And when we're talking about, even for example, I don't really want to go down this route of talking about whether electric cars are a viable solution or not. But when we're talking really about designing these spaces and challenging different ways of value exchange and different ways of distributing capital that is made and value that is generated, we have to re-examine the ways in which that is done. And when we start to bash all the isms, we can get into deep-heated political debate. Some people are for or against. I'm not really so concerned about that. If we can really push this paradigm shift of where it can be regulated from the start, but it's self-motivated to preserve the resources that sustain us. It's just common sense. And so really, as we shift to that, like the global green construction market is a $774 billion market. And so it's growing. And people know that there's money in building something that is resilient and can also withstand the kind of natural disasters and crises that we're already seeing. I'm not an alarmist. I'm very much a pragmatic person, but I am aware that with the different vulnerabilities caused by variations in climate and in just the local instabilities that are constantly brewing with people not pursuing a conscious way of life. It actually shocks me that even in 2023 we're still seeing wars, and it's it's something.
That wasn't my stomach. I think someone moved a table upstairs.
And so it's not, we're not trying to say that we're economists. We are more so designing different societies that also incorporate alternative value exchange systems that have been proven models, like shared income models of redistributing income generated by a community to people that typically do unpaid labor, like mothers. There's all different ways of rewarding people for labor that is unseen, as well as taking in more stakeholders into account when you're drawing up your accounting sheet. And so this is also where I want to move towards as well, like governance, economics, and social welfare are all things that we explore on how to provide for people in these different community spaces, because they're all kind of the fundamentals of society. How do you provide for all the human needs? Because really, of course, the one person is welcome to pursue all the wealth that they want. But I'm more interested in, I don't really care about capping that person. I care more about bolstering people to make sure that everyone is provided for, and that all of their universal base needs are met. That to me is more important. And then anybody with the motivation and the drive and the charisma to go be a hyper successful person, you're welcome to.
So would that play out? Say what was the name of the place you said that had 400?
Kuyabeh.
Kuyabeh. In Kuyabeh, would you say then that Kuyabeh would have a governance model of, well, maybe it already does. Here are the rules. Mm-hmm. Here's what we're going to do. So, for example, say you wanted a social welfare system which paid mothers to be mothers, mm-hmm. and you would take the money from the community in a tax, say, or whatever. Is this the idea, to sort of create a set of rules so that you know what you're letting yourself in for when you come in? If you live here, you will have to pay this, or mm-hmm. How do you incorporate those kind of things, like social welfare, for example?
So it's not that we're trying to do that in all the communities. This is models that we've seen working in existing communities. If that is something that is ideologically aligned with the people building the space, then that is appropriate to them. That's just one method and suggestion for governing yourself in an alternative way, and something that is not mandatory to be considered a regenerative neighborhood.
The approach of our collective is to share best practices through the research and in life experiences that we've been making by going to these places, logging them, documenting them, sharing a platform now, a digital space where people can see all the unique variations of what society can be, right? Just like there's a different number of humans, there will be a different number of communities for all of them.
Why don't you break down our approach?
I'd like to hear this.
Just one other question though. I'm interested to understand, do you, for example, will you make a contract in that situation? So if you have a set of rules, how do you enforce the rules in a particular community, or how would you expect them to? I agree, the best model would be a decentralized, world of completely different communities. The ones that work, the ones that don't fail and get edited out, and then you get the new ones.
And then they learn, and from that they make learning.
So how do you enforce the rules at these regenerative communities?
So each project will be unique in that way, right? Some projects will have, maybe because they've been around longer, it's generally, there's an infrastructure for presenting ideas, a voting system for implementing these ideas, and then kind of the self-policing of the community and the individuals that all agreed on, this is what feels best for all of us, or the majority of us, right? Some communities have a majority vote. Some communities have everyone has to vote in that direction for it to get implemented, or everyone -1 or -2 vote. So each community is unique. And the policing standards are also unique in how they ideally will self-monitor, as we all made this decision together, so we're all going to live by it because we can all agree that this leads to our overall success in that way. And this is what gives it a very decentralized feel, right? Like distributed democracy, you can consider that to be.
I mean, you'll have a good time at our conference then, because you'll meet a lot of different ways of governing.
I'm super excited about,
because the way I see it, I've spoken to about 50 people now over the last year on this podcast, building up my idea of what works, what doesn't, what I think might be a good solution. And at one end you have here are the rules.
Right.
If you come and live here, you abide by these rules.
Right.
And a lot of people love that model.
Sure.
I think there's a lot going for that model as well.
Definitely.
I grew up living in shared spaces, in communities. And what I noticed was they were very hard to live in, because when everyone had to agree on something, there was always one person who was annoyed with someone else and who vetoed something, and then you never got anything done.
Right.
And then one time I went to live in a place where it was someone's house. It was a big house,
right.
A lot of rooms, a lot of people living there. And he says, my house, you live by my rules.
Right.
And that was the best experience we had.
Flowed,
it was beautiful, So on one end you get that. On the other end you get the DAO.
Right.
Or you should speak to the people in Montelibro, because do you know this community?
Yes.
We went to visit them. And
introduce us to them, yeah?
Of course, yeah. And they're very decentralized. Cool. And they have a DAO. They have their own. They create a stable coin themselves. They trade in their own currency. They do all this kind of stuff. But they have very much constantly voting on things. Like Telegram groups are just going off the scale, just whirring through messages. And some people like that. I suppose I'm a bit more skeptical of those things because they're bloody complicated. They're super complicated, and I find complication is your enemy sometimes. It makes you go, it makes you give up. But
Right.
Have you got a preferred model yourselves?
And so one of the edges today is like the tools that are available to streamline this process, right? To put in a proposal for the voting process to happen and for it to be initiated. And I think this decision factor on what community I will join kind of comes in with like the concept of how old is this community or how established is this community. Of course, the more pioneering ones of us will be more drawn to a younger community. Well, yes, it will take more work, right? I'm the guy with the plan for the ship and going in to cut the trees down to start building the ship. This is 1% to 2% of the population, right? The arch of the population is, okay, the boat's been built and we're taking the first journey. Who's in? Maybe another 5 or 10% is in. The boat goes and makes its first journey back and forward. Now the rules are established because they already made a trip. Now 50% of the population will come. And this is the bell curve. And then the late movers come after 3 journeys, then they're willing to take their journey. It's very similar in the community space. And the governance models and the rules that dictate how the place operates is kind of this journey of the boat being built. The early movers will be in the telegrams, going to the community meetings multiple times a day, multiple hours a day, right? Multiple times a week, rather, multiple hours a day. Whereas when you join a more established community where you see the rules and you align by them, awesome. I'm going to align with this and I'm going to step into this community. I also see that there's an opportunity for me to, based on the governance and the design structure of the community, submit a proposal for something that I think would be better. Like, we should all put little rocks on the edges of our garden so that we know where our boundaries are and it's also still open versus fences to block things off. So it gives a freedom, and this is where you will decide, and this is part of what our work is about, to help share this decision metric for people, to make it easier for people to find the place that fits them the best. Right? Scaling and not scaling, but sharing through some standardized measuring tool where a community or regenerative neighborhood is in this evolution, not just of governance, but also of water sovereignty, food sovereignty, right? What percentage of your food are you growing? What percentage of your water are you fully responsible for? Waste management is a big one as well. That is one of the ugly jobs in the world, and critical, right, for society, waste management. So identifying these metrics so that the individual can decide, okay, I'm willing to do the work and step into this and hold this kind of space to get all these things figured out as we create our new society? Or are you more of like the end of the bell curve where, okay, I just want to find a place that I align by and I want to go and live my best life there? Standardizing this a bit is a big part of the work that we're doing to help grow this movement faster and bring people through very transparent communication and information available to them.
Our preferred method of governance is holacracy. Hola coming from hologram, where
Did you invent that word?
No.
No, that's a real word.
That's a real word.
Holacracy. Is that an old word, or is that like...
It's actually an emergent form of governance. It's a bit of a spin-off on sociocracy.
Holacracy.
Which is a pro-social framework that allows people to make decisions based on their areas of expertise. So it's like, bubbles within bubbles, circles that all have different leads. And these circles are autonomous in that they get to make decisions about what affects them. Because, why should people really be making decisions about something that doesn't affect them? And then they get to do that thought work, make that decision, present it to the larger group, and it's a bit more efficient, but it's also still like inclusive. For example, on all of these Telegram groups, you would only have to vote or make decisions on what is applicable to you, and so you wouldn't have to be in all the circles. You would only want to be in the circles that you actually choose to be in.
But holacracy, what's the definition of holacracy then? That actual, you started saying it comes from hologram, something. Yeah,
so that each piece of the governance system reflects the whole.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah. I see what you mean. Okay, and that's your preferred way of doing it, right? I want to drill down a little bit on some actual more examples of these things, because we're very much into real life here, right? So you said there were how many projects that you're aware of currently in what you would call regenerative neighborhoods currently around the world?
Oh man, there's nearly 4,000, but of the ones that are that we're really excited about, that's more of people who are have different projects where they're living in communities. It's not there's really a handful. It's more of a leading edge of people infusing technology into this new wave. There's maybe 10, 30 projects that we're really excited about.
Can you talk about some more of them then? So Mexico obviously What about other countries where you see?
Yeah, talk about TDF.
Portugal, Traditional Dream Factory is a
TDF,
project.
the Traditional Dream Factory.
Yeah.
I already want to go.
It's really, really innovative, really...
It's the first tokenized land project ever.
Right.
You want to talk to Montenegro then? They've already tokenized their land.
What's unique to them is, I guess, the way that they're sharing ownership of the space. In the most conventional way, it looks a lot like a timeshare, where when you buy access to this place, you're buying a token for one night at a time. And this is in perpetuity. So you essentially, if you enter the space and jump through the hoops of the trainings and the education pieces, you are a partial owner of this space, right? One night times however many units there are is the value of the macro project.
And you can use that to stay for that night, is that right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so this is your stake in your stewardship, let's say, value in the project. As you get more involved in the project and decide to spend more time in the space, you can be exchanged time for more accommodation and more space in the project. This also leads to more of your governance equity and stake in the project. Again, entering the circle of, if I'm the permaculturist, this is the circle I'm holding, and anyone else that's involved in wanting to make decisions for how we grow food on the project, or the architecture and build out bubble. If you are in that bubble, you get to decide more about like what will be happening in this project. And it's very early for the project. They've recently launched their token, and they're looking for the right people that want to be involved in the build out and development of the space. It was a previous farm with degraded land, and filling the proper footsteps of regeneration, they are now creating water systems in the space, food systems in the space, and raising money through these token sales to create more accommodation for more of the growing community in the space.
Yeah, I think they have like a luxury co-working build-out planned, which is meant to accommodate, they're a seasonal place, so they're actually built to only operate according to the kind of waves of digital nomadism. So this is another topic that I know I've heard you actually address in different podcast episodes, how to get the digital nomad to stay. And that some places you can just build like, oh, we're not going to operate. We're only going to operate seasonally. And that's one way to like stem the wave of people. So that's also something that they've built into their model.
Another beautiful project in California, Southern California, about 30 minutes outside of San Diego, called Wild Seeds. Vision holder Jordan, who found this place, again, degraded land, used to be farmland. Now, because of how traditional agriculture does its thing and just chops everything down and plows dirt and doesn't allow the mycelium networks to grow, right? I can go in on that. I'm a passionate permaculturist, agroforestry practitioner, and learner, let's call it, has put the energy into updating this place to make it comfortable, a big house, a farmhouse that he's renovated, and some smaller accommodations, to start now inviting community who is interested in coming and putting the stake in the ground. And he is sharing equity in the ownership of this place to the ones who come and hold space. And in this equity, you also enter into one of or multiple of these circles to decide on how the space will develop, right? New earth design, new earth principles on ownership, right? He could keep the place for himself and be the landlord as it was traditionally and keep the abundance. His vision is to help bring people into this, prove model, and scale. And this is one of the partnerships we're super excited about. Both of these places in the next year, we will be doing co-live residencies to bring people in, to show them this fire that's being created, to inspire them either to hunker down and stay there and learn and take some and learn some equity in the space, or bring that magic back to where they're going with a playbook that we provide of best practices.
Is a co-live residency mean you're going to live there for a bit?
Yeah, we'll be there for a few months at a time.
I'm just picking up your lingo bit by bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy you asked. Thank you for asking. Yeah.
Have you both got any idea on size limits of these kind of communities? Is something you've ever thought about?
I think it boils down to preference. Like everything from 20 people to 20,000 people, like building for micro city scale and village scale, I think is the whole spectrum of where we wish to operate, because we see them like all. Even within cities, I do see decentralization happening where people can meet their needs closer to home. But I don't see a size limit so much as something that's like an optimal size for really having close relationships with the people around you that allow you to engage in networks of trust that would be necessary for the type of alternative income and governance models that we're talking about.
And this question is actually really beautiful, right? This organization is being designed on this exponential organization model, which is kind of a new design thing of how organizations are forming these days. And with this in mind, one of the principles of this is not just to create a mission statement, but to create an MTP, a massive transformative purpose, something so big that when people read it, the average person goes, that's impossible. And that number for us is 53 million communities around the world. And the way we devise this number comes from this question you just asked of what is the ideal size? Another psychologist, scientist named Dunbar has the Dunbar number, which is 150 people, which is, in his studies, the ideal number for having the right amount of perspectives, the right amount of skills, and still being small enough that you have a personal relationship with each of these persons to create the safety we need as humans to continue up that Maslow hierarchy journey. So 150 is one of the numbers that we're working around, not necessarily for the limit to the size of the macro community, but for the design of the micro communities within these macro communities, right? You can have 100,000 people living together just in clusters of 150 is one of the designs that we are really passionate about designing and bringing in. And again, with the idea of mimicking nature, potentially in the shape of honeycombs, because it's a strong shape and it's pleasant to the eye and a lot of these concepts. But 150 is one of these really key numbers that we're working around and designing around based on sizes, right? At this Kuyabeh property, our vision is to help implement not just one macro community, because that's tough, but a community of communities, right? Small bubbles of potentially things that connect them, right? Maybe an art cluster, a metal worker cluster, right? Guilds of people around skills that divide the construct thresholds that people divide themselves by, right? Like race, or gender, or nationalities, right? Or religions. Instead, let's connect by things that really give us passion, things that really inspire us, things that make us be our inner child. And these are the beautiful ways to come together as humans and the ways that feel really, really good for us.
I would argue that that's religion as well, though. What's that?
I got a call.
Okay. No, I'd argue that religion is one of the things that brings people together in that way, though. And
it's true.
You just said not around religion.
It's true. So religion is a beautiful thing, right? Again, it's a set of principles that feel really good for people.
Oscar's actually been studying religion to understand social movements and unifying people around shared beliefs.
Very much, very much. And so I'm a big fan of the decentralized movement to the core, right? Sure, crypto did it for money in the first iteration that everyone noticed, again, because we all were really stuck around this concept of money and how it creates society, right? But the decentralization movement is happening in all aspects, right? Airbnb proved it for hospitality. Uber proved it for transport. Google proved it for information, right? Google doesn't make all the information. Other people make it. Google just presents it to you on their platform. Same as Airbnb, same as Uber. And it's happening with society in the form of these regenerative neighborhoods. So we are just riding this trend. Just like everything's getting decentralized, so is society.
Arguably, though, the examples you just gave me of decentralized Uber, Google, and Airbnb, they've all become monolithic gatekeepers, haven't they? So how do you mitigate that?
Right.
How do you stop that happening?
It can happen, right? By nature, the way, literally the way nature works is resources are concentrated around things, right? Energy is concentrated in the plants. Nutrients are concentrated in the soil. Water is concentrated in basins. So following that is, I think, where humanity is going, and starting to devise how we can allow for this concentration to happen with equitable distribution. This is a big part of the journey.
All of those examples still provide an interesting way that it has made hospitality, for example, more accessible to various amounts of people. And this is like what we're trying to do with providing alternative ways of existing in society that are more fulfilling. So giving people who have really awesome, innovative ideas around ways to relate to each other, ways to make decisions, ways to distribute resources. They're basically like experimental spaces. This is one of the huge overlaps I see between regenerative neighborhoods and free cities. They're so similar. Like, even we're aware of like biohacking communities of a bunch of people getting together to like build biohacking optimized community life and live forever. And that's also.
Well, they're doing that in Prosper right now.
Exactly. That was the parallel that I wanted to draw. They're investigating heavily biotech longevity, which is a fascinating thing to have in common with another person. And so imagine combining the people that want to live that lifestyle with the people that are researching and innovating and inventing around that. This topic of decentralization is more around, okay, like people have an idea for ways that they want to innovate in industry and researching. Let's take biotech longevity, for example, as a field. So they want to innovate in medicine, and they also want people who are up for experimenting on themselves with that. So they go and they create a biotech longevity community where people are very passionate about the lifestyle. I would think that's one of the key ways to create a kind of space that is so desirable that you don't want to leave, because you have access to all of these oxygen bars and EEG monitors when you sleep that isn't available elsewhere. So really making it a space that's like highly convenable to the lifestyle. Like I was one of the really interesting podcast episodes that I listened to from the Free Cities Foundation with you and Andreas Baumgarter. I loved when he mentioned integrated zones and lifestyle zones, where you're actually building like community life and integrating all areas of retail, commercial, and on top of that, having a layer of this is a space built for a certain type of lifestyle. And that could very much be an environmentally friendly, biohacker, hyper successful, productivity focused, growth mindset type of person, which I think really like hits the demographic of most digital nomads that I know that are on this journey of growth and are interested in unlocking human potential. And so that's one of the things that I see. And also typical challenges that both spaces face are getting funding and getting people. And so really one of our approaches in this movement is, we have chosen, despite our resources, not to go out and construct our own regenerative neighborhood first. We've decided to step back, research all of the existing projects, collate all of the available data on what makes a successful a community land project like this, because at the end of the day, they're all really just community real estate. This is what I would argue for free cities as well. And so we've decided to, all right, we can observe all of the existing projects out there, gather information, and then empower these different neighborhoods in different ways, these different community land projects in the most leveraged way to make sure that they're successful. Because for us, it's a failure if 20 different people buy different projects, and then they're like, where are the other people that I need to make this project successful? If they can collaborate on it, they're much more likely to pool their resources and be successful if they're aligned. So we're also building processes that allow you to understand, are we aligned with these people? And can we make a really next generation project together?
Do you mean, a kind of, you ask people a bunch of questions, to get a profile of them, and then it's like, yeah, you'd fit into this community kind of thing. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, we give them tools, we give them visual manifestos, we give them processes, various amounts of questions that they can take and ask. Like these are just toolkits that we're building to make the people who are building these projects more successful. And we're working with someone who's in the networked cities movement, who's building this framework as well. So I'm really excited to implement that.
Our first version platform, as you create your profile on here, we ask a section about what is your dream community? How many neighbors would you like, right? How many people would you like to live around?
Why don't you give context about what the platform is?
Yeah, the Tribe's platform is the Regenerative Neighborhood movement platform, a space where land projects and community members can explore and meet each other, again, through data. Sharing a standardized form of metrics and important points that we have identified that help the right person find the right project for them. And so on this profile, you create your dream community list, right? Close your eyes. Where would you love to live? Temperature, region, principles that they go by, intentions of the community, and different things like this, that through an AI implementation, you will be matched through natural language, so people can just share their stories through keywords, matched into communities that you should take a look at. Not just communities, but also people that can seem to do this beautiful thing that nature does, which is find the complementing pairs. Of individuals and also of individuals to community land projects. So by asking these questions that sometimes people don't even know they need to ask until they get there and start building their home and go, whoa, I don't know if this was the right decision. I should have asked this from the beginning. And so we've been gathering these scenarios from people so that we can do what humans are good at, which is the collective learning, so that we don't have to start from scratch every single time, both for the build out of the place, but also for the matching and finding of the right place.
Did I remember rightly? Did you say that at the Mexican one we spoke about first, they've sold 150 plots?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Who's buying these plots? And what, because I'm very much into these things working.
Right.
And I want to see people buying plots, building things, living there, doing all this stuff. Because obviously my thought is, having, spent, I'm 52 now, I've lived through a lot of interesting things that have happened in my life.
Right.
And I often see community projects coming together and then the idea is phenomenal, but it's very difficult to implement most community things.
Right, definitely.
And so a lot of them, I'm always a little bit skeptical of something like that because I love the ideas, but the reality is you've got thousands of individual characters and they all have to be aligned for these things to work in a way. And humans don't like aligning a lot of the time, especially not the kind of people that are A, digital nomads, B, sort of like certain ideals and characteristics. We're very much freedom sort of individuals. How do you get all these?
That's so different from my own personal experience.
How do you get all these? Well, maybe, but how do you?
You're a star child, my love. You're a sun child. So there is.
Yeah, I would argue though that I think I know what you're talking about. I would argue that you are all aligned, but you're not very independently individual in that sense, because I would look at you and say, oh yeah, I recognize all those people. I could probably guess you're into this, and this.
Right.
As you could if you looked at, say, if you went to the other end of the free city spectrum.
Right.
You'd see people in suits and ties who like order, who like maintaining, they like conserving, they like all these things, and they're all really important parts of the movement. But
so a one-word answer for you is principles. Model success, be success. One of the icons I follow deeply is Ray Dalio, and a book he wrote is based principles, right? And principles are the things that guide us when shit hits the fan, you can say. In emotional turmoil, in scarcity, in the tough moments in life, you revert back to your principles, right? In those difficult moments is when people clash and the alignment really doesn't happen. So defining and helping guide people to find each other and find their places based on principles, I would say is the core of raising the probability of success, right? I don't want to use the word ensuring success because, again, humans are the eternal variable. You could be having a good day, you could be having a bad day, you're both having a bad day, it's a disaster. You're both having a good day, it's harmony and beauty. On that day where you're both having a bad day, if your principles align, all the decisions you make boil down to the core principles. So helping the physical projects define the principles that define them is something that a lot of the times can be overlooked because we got to build the buildings and we got to put the food in the ground, and they've missed the step of defining the principles and iterating and continuously reviewing them. Step one for the physical place. Step two is helping the people identify the principles that are key to them in their journey, and then matching them accordingly with this piece. And this is what we're gonna be collecting. Lots of data, not just of physical places but also of the individuals through this platform. And again, through AI, this beautiful little machine that can pop out videos that took teams weeks to do in minutes. Same ideology, right? What we require a team of people to match hundreds of thousands of people to thousands of projects can now happen in a click, in a day. And smart match based on these metrics and pieces that we feel are critical, right? The one-word solution, principles.
I think in my world, people would call that meaning. And meaning allows you to navigate any experience.
Meaning, interesting, okay.
Well, because I think there's a common meme these days is this pursuit of happiness, right?
Right.
And I'm not a fan of the pursuit of happiness. I'm a fan of the pursuit of meaning.
Meaning, right.
Because
purpose,
happiness isn't the right emotion a lot of the time.
Right.
When terrible things happen, if you're happy, people are going to look at you a bit weird. But if you have a meaningful existence, then you navigate all these things with the same intensity, even when it's the most terrible thing or the best thing. You know?
Right.
I think that's where we're slightly aligned on that. I agree. Yeah. But then again, you see, I've had this conversation with a number of people in the Free Cities movement about, do ideologically aligned communities work? And a lot of people are like, hell no, they don't. This is a terrible idea. Right. Otherwise, we'd already have all these ideologically aligned communities in the world. Right. We don't. When you design, cities are just melting pots of people, just all coming in, blah, blah. It's not like, oh, let's go and live in the kind of, I don't know, the yoga city or the, like the kind of, the football city, the American football city or whatever, That's not a natural thing to do. I don't know.
Why do you think it's not?
Well,
just because it's not happening yet.
Well, there is that. I'd say 150,000 years of human history is a pretty good quota. Look at society. Societies evolve based on, the division of, kind of like the division of labor, isn't it? It's like, have we got someone that can do this? Have we got someone that can do that?
Right.
It's not necessarily, do you believe in this? It's more like, can you do this? I don't know. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I just think there's some evidence.
Yeah, I think historically most of human civilization has been built out of circumstance and need. So you don't really necessarily have the luxury to choose. You just have to work with the relations that you have and, build diplomacy and on a societal level and on an individual level, just provide for yourself. I'm really curious now that we live in this age of information and being able to connect with someone across the world and find like-minded people and, for example, be on a libertarian forum or be on like a random group of people looking for this very specific niche of something that is of interest to you. No matter what it is, I think that's actually one of the tools that allows us to explore this new way of organizing ourselves. I definitely agree that just because it hasn't been the natural way to organize doesn't mean that, I meet people every single day, whether they're millionaire digital nomads that are just like have retired indefinitely and don't even know what to do with themselves, to people who are really struggling. They all seek an experience of like-mindedness and people who at least agree on basic tenets of lifestyle. And that's not to say you can't live harmoniously alongside people who don't share that, because I think to say that is false as well. Like, you should also explore to share space with the people that bother you the most. But I'm saying, and I propose, that the technology that we have, and this is why we built the platform, to connect people around the world, so that if you have a project and you have land, like some people are just offering up free land, if people are willing to come and build a sustainable house and live there. There's all kinds of opportunities, and there's all kinds of different people that would sync together really well. And this is part of what's available to us and what's really exciting. And so that's what I propose to you about, what's a new feature of the times that we live in that would actually allow us to build our lifestyles consciously.
Well, I tend to agree with you. It's something I've literally realized this year, funnily enough, by talking to people on this podcast, is that possibly, and I don't know if it's definitely true, but possibly we are redefining the borders of the groupings on the planet. This is the very, very, very beginning of it. It could be, and it could be. And because the internet was a massive invention, it wasn't just some little thing that happened. It's just, as you say, it's taken the middleman out of almost every industry, and it's done it to money now, which is money's the most incredibly powerful tool at the heart of the human experience, and now that's been decentralized. It's like, so you're right, maybe in 500 years,
is the trend, man, and it's happening with society next, right? And we are agents of this movement. This is the goal of this collective, to facilitate the learnings that have been happening since the beginning of how we created our initial little pods of agricultural society and then industrial society. And now we're a social society, because we don't have to scrounge for food and we don't have to scrounge for money, right? If you understand the machine and tend your garden accordingly, resources are abundant. Education is abundant. Tools and network are abundant. You can live this life. So now the humans are following what the journey of money follows, right? First you buy things with money, then you buy services and people's time with money, then you buy experiences, then you buy transformative experiences. Transformative experiences are based on our personal journey of healing, and that only happens when people get to observe us and hold safe spaces for us. We get to make these breakthroughs and connect what we really seek to do as humans, right? Our biological drive is to procreate and create a human. This is the first layer and the most primordial layer of co-creation, is creating another human. The next step in this is co-creating businesses that do good for the world, right? With not just capital as a metric. I'm a money person as well, right? Yes, money is potential energy to do awesome stuff. Capital as a metric, and nature as a metric, and humans as a metric, to create little gardens that create all of that in abundance. And so places like this, where we can be surrounded by people with similar ideologies to us, similar principles. I just ChatGPT'd the difference between ideologies and principles. And ideologies are a bit more fluid, while principles are really guidelines that help dictate us in moments of challenge. And so this is, again, one of the key things that we really help both physical projects and people find to, the vision I have and I've received is little bubbles of, like I described, the art, 150 people, the metal worker, 150 people, the woodworkers, 150 people. And we all live because we do similar things and we enjoy similar things. The sports, 150 people. And you get to go to all of these communities because they're all within walking distance, maybe by some electric little tram in this beautiful image I have of the ideal regenerative neighborhood, and then copying and paste that model in all the places that will take this.
Like, I would say that, honestly, if a free city isn't incorporating sustainability into their model, they can't claim to be futuristic at all. Like, they can't claim to be innovative because, like, and also they're not tapping into the funding that's available for sustainable development. There's so many different ways that, sustainability, if you invest now, could long-term save you so much in terms of costs. So I see it as like a necessary component to integrate in someone who wants to develop a special economic zone or wants to explore, a legal autonomy just for the sake of legal autonomy and freedom. I would say that like incorporating this sustainable, progressive way of constructing these spaces, like it's just common sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, but there are other innovations. I think that's the thing.
Of course,
the governance. I mean, people I know think that the innovation would be not having a democratic system, for example, which disenfranchises so many people. That's the innovation, and which is good enough for a lot of people. They want to live somewhere where they know the rules won't be changed in 4 years' time by their competitors coming in and having 51% of the vote, where half the people are sitting there going, "Wait a minute, I didn't sign up for this." Mm-hmm. That's one of the innovations. Would be, okay, well, let's just say, okay, well, you can have your free place, your free jurisdiction. Here are the rules. A bit like you're saying. I think you're saying roughly the same thing. But also you're saying a bit. They have to have a sustainability option, and I think, I think it depends what you mean by that.
Well, infrastructure mostly, right? If you're going in and you're creating buildings, creating facilities where you're going to conduct all of your businesses, like. It's just a given that should be sustainable. Otherwise, you're like...
one of the simple, again, model success be success of nature, right? That there is no waste product in this system that is created. In that one thing's output becomes the input for another thing. And it's very easy to design systems like this and structures like this, right? With water systems, with food systems, with energy systems. So this is, I think, one of the, again, I always, in my communication with people of complex topics sometimes, I like to boil it down to a single thing, and that makes sense. And this to me is a definition of sustainability, that there is no waste in the system, right? That the sludge doesn't happen. This concept we've come across of like the sludge that forms, which is like the little tidbits of stuff that eventually start stacking up, and then you're left with bottles of toxic sludge that have to go somewhere. Designing systems that help use that in a mechanism that feed another thing is one example of sustainability. Also, this means that you don't get left with a load of weight to handle later on, and that it becomes a burden for others is key. This allows for the longevity of something to persist without tension or stress, right? There'll always be work necessary, but in a well-designed system, it creates a beautiful flow, just as nature happens.
I think I'm just thinking about that now, and I'm thinking, okay, in my mind, where the disconnect comes is that system is the design system. So you were saying we need to design a system which works like nature. Yet nature is a completely chaotic system that works. So they seem a little bit in conflict with each other for me.
Right.
Because I all I know is that when we try and design systems on a large scale, they always end up being terrible. We invent one thing which is the worst thing for the next generation. We invent the car and think, wow, this is amazing. It's much better than horses. And then it's like, oh, no, we're destroying the planet with cars now. Well,
Right. There's a saying I love that the biggest mistake humans ever made was to think that they could design it and do it better than nature. I follow this very much in the sense of agriculture. Right? There are ways of farming called centropic agroforestry systems that one-to-one mimic nature, just with us doing some things that speed up the process. So you can create a food forest not in 500 years, but in 10 years. And this is going to revolutionize the way that industrial farming is happening now, which is a man-made process that we thought was better. Oh, let's just dump chemicals on it to give the nature the things that it needs and do this thing. And we're desertifying the world by doing this. And in the same direction, we can design lots of things in this way. It just takes, like you said, the person with a little more time, a little more awareness to observe the things and take into account prioritizing the environment, right? Little things. For example, I bring this reusable water bottle around everywhere. It inspires me every day. It's a water company that we love, a friend of ours named Karuna and his Water Now project, bringing sustainable water systems to not just the ones that can pay for it, but taking some of his earnings to save money to bring these water systems to the indigenous who really need it because their river is getting polluted upstream. An example of not only valuing money as his metric of success, but also valuing the human experience as his metric of success, and designs like this and systems like this that define how his business operates. And because of this, he has more abundance than if he was just keeping the money from the people. He's landed tons of contracts due to this mission and campaign, right? And I bring the bottle up because the difference between this, if I was thirsty, I would have to drink this. I get to go to the sink here because Prague has good water and I can fill my bottle up. Every single one of these bottles I fill is 500 years in a landfill. That one-on-one doesn't add up, but times 8 billion people definitely adds up. And it's the little decisions like this that we make up, that when we adamantly believe in the decentralized principle, we believe in the power of the individual, because this is what the decentralized movement is all about in all the ways. So all these little things that add up to the macro, right? Another one of my principles personally is as above, so below, the concept of correspondence, that the micro reflects the macro. Just like the planets orbit the sun, our electrons orbit our neutrons, and so forth and so on, or whatever, our protons.
What I would say though is, your water bottle is a good example, because most people will pick the convenient water bottle, right? Right. We see that on a day-to-day basis. Right. Otherwise, the water bottle wouldn't exist. It's a silly idea, really, when you think about it in terms of... Before water bottles, I was absolutely fine. But now I've arrived in a city, it's like, I've got people coming, I need to provide for them because they're going to get thirsty. Here's the water bottle, right? Of course. Right. And that's what I did. And that's what most people do. So how do you get people on board with this idea? Like,
you asked this question at the beginning, and I was going to mention it, but we got caught off in a great conversation. I'm loving this conversation, by the way. It's great. This idea of how do you make it catch on? Man, you do the same techniques that the Matrix is doing to people to make them buy stuff that they don't need by glamorizing it, right? Putting people that are now embodying the things that people really seek, being happy, being healthy, being on a growth path of success, both on a purpose level and also on a financial level and also on a creative level, and glamorizing the things that the world really needs, like glamorizing our water bottles, right? The little things. Glamorizing living in a place where we compost our food. Because throwing our waste into a bag and sending it to a dump so it becomes methane gas is such a loss. And it's so silly that happens, when all you have to do is throw your compost in a pile and sprinkle some leaves on it. And you create the most real level of gold in this world, which is soil, that feeds plants that actually give you nutrition. This is closing the loop on things. And it's just not glamorized in the right way. It hasn't been prioritized because what we were focused on is scaling and growing for the least cost. And we chose one path that we thought was the best. And it's okay as a startup to go one path. We just need to have the growth mindset to say, okay, that path we took potentially wasn't the best. Let's take 2 or 3 steps back and redesign based on the things we've learned today. And I think this is a big, beautiful part of what our initiative and movement is about, is redesigning society in this way, right? Not fighting the system that exists today because it's not working in the best way, right? Lots of people have stuff to say about it. It could be better. Great. Our approach is, let's use that energy, and instead of fighting the old system, let's build new ones that make that system obsolete. And this is the big, I would say, drive of the regenerative neighborhood movement and this process that we are really bringing to the world.
was going to leave it there, but I felt like you wanted to say something just now.
Well, I actually wanted to answer your earlier question about the type of people who are investing in the Mexico project, because there's a split of people. There's a split of people who are investors who are putting money into the project because they see like the radical potential. And they've actually already made money just by like the value of the land has gone up over time because it's a sustainable development. Families who are wanting to make the leap into a sustainable community, but haven't been able to use that. Haven't been able to fully transition because you don't want to be the first one on the dance floor. You don't want to be the first one in a community living by yourself. And then, a lot of individuals who are digital nomads who have the freedom to be there, but aren't gonna yet build their own housing. So this is also one thing that we see as really key.
How much do you get for one plot, by the way? Are they all different, or is it like?
It's 0.5 hectare or 1 hectare plots.
Oh, so nice size.
1 acre or 2 acres, more or less.
And what's the price on that?
Ballpark. 1 acre, the big plot, the 2 acre plots or 1 hectare plots are like 175,000 right now.
Wow.
Dollars. Right, and so that price was, I think, 80,000 when this went on the market 8 years ago. So, right, early investors have already doubled their...
That's amazing. I was expecting it to be like 20 or 30,000. That's really interesting.
I like, Tulum is a unique part of Mexico.
Yeah, all right.
Unique has just this influx of money and tourism. Right. Tulum is a different beast compared to the rest of Mexico, price-wise specifically, and for land, right? The airport in Tulum opens December 1st. So there'll be an international airport 25 minutes away from this community. Right. There's a train that's getting established right now that'll connect Cancun to Tulum and then to the rest of the Yucatan Peninsula in the next X years. Process is happening already. So it's boiling up to be a very metropolitan space already, with a place that was a fisherman village 10 years ago, already has a very metropolis feel, which is beautiful for us as a stage to present these new earth civilization projects, these regenerative neighborhoods where people already want to come to a place and they get to come and see what a pilot looks like. That doesn't necessarily have to be there where they live. Through this network we're growing, we can show them lots of other places that are embodying these principles of, I love this term, new earth in a way, right? Just new paradigm. Designing in ways that don't just follow the trend, but want to radically change it for the benefit of all. And this is a big part of this regenerative movement.
Yeah, so just to put it into perspective, Regen Tribe is a tech startup. Like, we've built this platform, we built tech-empowered tools that are focusing on these next wave of resilient, self-sufficient, sustainable, intentional community land projects. And we're really excited for the conference in Prague this weekend. We are so excited to be working directly with people who are building these types of projects or want to build these types of projects, because there's so much overlap in that we can complement each other and strengthen the portfolio of what the attraction around investment can look like in these projects, as well as holistic design and the legal sovereignty aspect. I think will strengthen these types of places. I think building resiliency into these places is going to be really exciting to see. So I am very much looking forward to
Are you two speaking together at the conference at the same stage?
I wish Oscar was
You've got
speaking.
a really interesting dynamic. I've got to tell you.
Together.
I keep looking to you for a translation. It's like, I'm going, yeah, that sounds good, man. What's he saying?
Yeah. I'm just I'm out here and I'm in the vision space, and I'm bringing it down in different ways.
Yeah, Oscar's our founder and CEO. He's definitely the alpha male leader, and we're super happy to.
You're a pragmatist. You're a dreamer. Am I getting that right?
I'm a dreamer that brings the things down and makes them happen. So far, I haven't missed any marks, and it's because my drive is for environment and humans. And in the supply and demand curve, it's what everyone needs, even if they don't know they need it yet.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing how it all progresses. I mean, we're in the similar situation ourselves. We have a few pilot projects that are working.
Key.
But you're right in saying the key thing is to have some working models that you can show people, because otherwise we're all dreamers, aren't we?
Right.
Oscar, Nicole, thank you. It's been wonderful talking to you. I look forward to speaking to you more over the next few days here in Prague.
Definitely.
Thank you, Timothy.
That's all right. Yeah, you're my name, right? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the time, brother. Great conversations, great talk. Really enjoyed it.